Today's gaming community has a nearly endless stream of video game hardware to choose from, and competition among manufacturers is intense. But that wasn't the case in 1990, if you can remember back that far. Japanese-based Nintendo dominated the market until an upstart named Sega came along and changed the gaming world. Blake Harris is the author of a new book, Console Wars, which hits the stores May 13th, and he joins me now to discuss this David and Goliath story. And of course, for people thinking of Sega, it's Sonic the Hedgehog, it's Toe Jam and Earl, it's a lot of other games, but Sonic really became the face of Sega.
Yeah, Sonic was the face of Sega. He really personified the company, as did Mario for Nintendo. Even just in the respect that Sonic was this fast, edgy character, which really epitomized the personality of those executives at Sega, and Nintendo was more of a slower, slow and steady wins the race explorer.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge thing, and Sega came out with a color where, full color. And we're looking at Sonic there, and I've played this game so many times till way too late at night. Not for a long time have I done that. That was on the Sega Genesis, and then the Nintendo was just in sort of various shades of one color, right? Initially.
Well, Nintendo had the Game Boy, which was their handheld and part of their world domination at the time, and Sega came out with the innovative Game Gear, which was in full color. And that was sort of a nod to Sega's business strategy at the time, was taking things to the next level technologically as well as culturally.
So how does a small company, and it was a relatively small company,
right,
just saying, oh, we're going to completely change everything, we're going to get a character and completely overturn things, and they did.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, it sounds like, of course that happened, but there were 50 other companies trying to do the same thing, and Sega was the one that actually managed to pull it off. I mean, there's a lot of factors that went into it. I think that the first step was to bring in Tom Kalinske, who had a storied career in the toy business. He had revitalized the Barbie line in the 70s, helped create the Masters of the Universe line in the early 80s, worked in Matchbox cars, and he had no experience with video games, so it was as established as he was in that world, he knew nothing about video games and had no reputation in that world. So it was a bit of a risk, but he was really the guy who pulled it all together for Sega. Sonic being a great example. I think that the Sonic game is really fun. It's kept you up for hours, it's addictive. But in terms of turning a great gameplay into a cultural icon that to this day is, Sonic is more popular than ever, that was so much of Tom's influence and Sega of America's influence in creating a backstory and creating a global icon that could work in every country around the world and, give Nintendo a run for their money.
Okay, and Nintendo, going to the Consumer Electronics Show in 1989, tell us about that.
I mean, Nintendo's story is really interesting because this is, in the context of Sega versus Nintendo, it is a David versus Goliath tale. But Nintendo, the Goliath in this dynamic, was 5 years earlier a David themselves. They took on the monumental task of resurrecting the video game industry after Atari crashed in the 1983, and they buried all those games, highlighted by the E.T. burial, which was just uncovered a couple weeks ago. People thought video games were dead, that it was just a fad, that it wasn't going to be.
I remember hearing that on the news a lot. And people say it's over, there's no more video games. And I was suspectful at the time because I knew that games are always going to be good and computers were clearly here to stay, even in the 80s, despite when my friends' fathers were saying, these are business machines and they shouldn't be used to play games. And of course we would, right?
Yeah.
But so it was interesting. And we got new companies coming along like Rovio with the Angry Birds thing. Is that just going to be the nature of the business? Is when you get too big, you can't move as fast, and you just get overthrown by some whippersnapper?
I mean, you see that in every industry, especially in the tech industry where things move very fast.
Particularly in the gaming industry, though, you would think, right? Because it is once you have programmed it, you can produce as many copies of this for very low or no money.
Right, and the fun thing for me was, as much as I was looking at this era of the video game industry where it was a much smaller investment, $500,000 or $1 million, on a much quicker output, to be looking at that era where console games today are, like Hollywood movies, going on and competing against them is these games like those made by Rovio and those made by King, the Candy Crush game. And what's going on in the app world is very much mirroring what happened in the console world back in the day.
So what you're saying is the more things change, the more they stay the same. Thank you very much, sir. Blake Harris, author of the book Console Wars. I'm Simon Constable, and that's it.